In the heart of Belgrade, over 100,000 citizens filled the streets on March 15, 2025, creating one of the largest demonstrations in Serbia's recent history. What began as grief over a preventable tragedy transformed into a powerful movement, challenging President Aleksandar Vucic's 13-year hold on power. The government warned of violence and chaos, yet the massive rally remained largely peaceful, organized not by traditional political forces, but by university students who refused to accept corruption as inevitable. What turns ordinary students into leaders of a national movement? How does a railway station collapse become the catalyst for challenging an entrenched political system? This is the story of how tragedy, persistence, and courage combined to create a defining moment for Serbia's future. For months, student demonstrations have spread across Serbia, evolving from silent memorials into a direct challenge to President Vucic's leadership. The central tension lies between a government desperately working to maintain control of its carefully constructed narrative and a student movement demanding accountability for a system they believe values political connections over human lives. The stakes couldn't be higher. For the government, these protests represent an unprecedented threat to its legitimacy. For the students, this is about creating a Serbia where 15 deaths don't simply become another footnote in a history of impunity. And for ordinary citizens caught between these forces, the movement offers both hope and uncertainty in a nation where meaningful political change has long seemed impossible. To understand the current wave of protests, we must first understand the triggering event. On November 1, 2024, a concrete canopy collapsed at a recently renovated railway station in Novi Sad, Serbia's second-largest city, killing 15 people. What might have been treated as a tragic accident elsewhere was immediately viewed through the lens of endemic corruption. Many Serbians believed the disaster reflected a system where government contracts prioritize political connections over safety standards. For nearly 13 years, President Vucic and his Serbian Progressive Party have dominated the political landscape. Critics accuse the administration of suppressing media freedoms, fostering corruption, and maintaining connections to organized crime, all allegations that Vucic and his supporters firmly deny. Within days of the tragedy, university students began organizing vigils. They observed 15 minutes of silence daily, 1 minute for each victim. What began as memorials quickly evolved into something more structured. Students established blockades at universities across Serbia and articulated specific demands: the release of all documents related to the railway station disaster, accountability for those responsible, and prosecution of officials who oversaw the flawed renovation. This corrupt monstrosity of a regime, this corrupt entity, must be compelled to function appropriately or be dismantled. The Vucic administration's response evolved through several phases. Initially, the government announced an anti-corruption campaign, leading to numerous arrests on corruption charges and the resignation of Prime Minister Milos Vucevic and 2 other ministers. As protests gained momentum, President Vucic shifted to a more confrontational stance. He characterized the demonstrations as a colored revolution orchestrated by Western powers, claiming to have received support from Russian President Vladimir Putin during a telephone conversation. Ahead of the March 15th rally, Vucic issued repeated warnings about purported plans for violence, threatening arrests and severe penalties for any disturbances. Interior Minister Ivica Dasic reported arrests of opposition activists allegedly planning to incite unrest and orchestrate a coup. The student leaders have consistently emphasized peaceful protest while maintaining clear demands focused on accountability rather than partisan politics. Their movement has attracted diverse participants from educators to farmers, united by disillusionment with a system they see as fundamentally corrupt. Female students played a prominent role, leading demonstrations on International Women's Day that connected anti-corruption messages with concerns about gender-based violence. They observed 19 minutes of silence, 15 for the train station victims, +4 for women killed by domestic violence in Serbia this year. I believe this will challenge his authority and that Vucic will come to understand that the people are no longer behind him. As weeks passed without satisfactory government response, students escalated their tactics. On March 7th, tens of thousands marched through Belgrade, supporting a general strike called by students. While some businesses, artists and union leaders participated, most public services and companies continued normal operations. By March 10th to 11th, protesters blockaded state broadcaster buildings in Belgrade and Novi Sad, preventing employees from entering and disrupting live programming. This bold move highlighted frustration with media coverage that many viewed as biased toward the government. The movement reached its peak on March 15th with a massive rally in Belgrade. Despite government attempts to limit attendance by cancelling bus and train services and denying entry to foreign journalists, crowds converged from all directions. The scale was unprecedented. Police estimated 107,000 participants, while independent media characterized it as the largest demonstration in Serbia's history. The event was named 15 for 15, commemorating both the date and the lives lost in Novi Sad. The atmosphere was charged with the sounds of whistles, drums and vuvuzelas. Some demonstrators displayed signs proclaiming "He's finished," while chants of "Pump it up" echoed throughout, a slogan that has become emblematic of the student movement. Despite the largely peaceful nature of the demonstration, there were isolated confrontations. Following these incidents, student organizers abruptly announced an end to the rally, citing safety concerns. While many began to disperse, thousands remained in the streets as tensions escalated. Interior Minister Vucic reported 13 arrests overnight before the protest, including 6 opposition activists allegedly planning to incite unrest. A significant police presence surrounded government buildings and the presidential palace. In one incident, police arrested a man who drove his vehicle into protesters, causing injuries. The Serbian protests coincide with similar anti-government demonstrations in neighboring Hungary against Prime Minister Viktor Orban. When asked about these parallel movements, Vucic claimed they shared the same signature, reinforcing his narrative of Western orchestration. These events reflect broader regional tensions between populist governance models and civil society movements demanding greater accountability. For countries throughout Eastern Europe with similar political dynamics, the Serbian student movement provides a potential template for civic engagement. The political crisis poses a complex challenge for international stakeholders. While the previous US administration sought to woo Vucic away from Serbia's traditionally close partnership with Russia, opposition politicians criticized this approach as too accommodating of democratic backsliding. The situation is further complicated by business interests, including reported plans for a Trump-branded luxury hotel in Belgrade's center, highlighting how commercial considerations can intersect with diplomatic relationships in the region. Speaking after the March 15th demonstration, Vucic acknowledged the rally as a large protest with enormous negative energy toward the authorities. Notably, he added that his government understood the message and will have to change ourselves, perhaps signaling openness to some reforms while avoiding specifics. This could lead to meaningful concessions, perhaps including prosecutions related to the railway disaster and reforms to address corruption while maintaining the core power structure. This approach might satisfy some protesters while falling short of the systemic change others demand. A second possibility is further escalation of protests. The March 15th demonstration, while massive, was billed by organizers as merely the beginning of the end, a process that I hope will reach a resolution soon, according to participant Dejan Simic. If protests continue or grow, pressure could mount for more fundamental changes, potentially including early elections under reformed conditions. However, Vucic has rejected opposition demands for a transitional government to oversee such elections. The most concerning scenario would involve a harsh government response. While Vucic has so far avoided major crackdowns, there have been isolated incidents of violence against demonstrators. Vucic appears mindful of how Ukraine's former president Viktor Yanukovych triggered his own downfall in 2014 by using brute force against protesters, a cautionary tale for leaders facing similar challenges. The Serbian student movement has already achieved something remarkable, transforming grief over 15 lost lives into a national conversation about accountability. What began with silent vigils has evolved into a powerful voice demanding change. Whatever the immediate political outcome, these events have demonstrated that citizen engagement can challenge even deeply entrenched power structures. The students who stood in silence for 15 minutes each day have broken a much longer silence of resignation that had settled over Serbian society. As one protester reflected during the massive Belgrade rally, this is merely the beginning of the end. Whether that prophecy proves accurate remains to be seen, but the voices that filled Belgrade streets have ensured that Serbia's future cannot be decided without them. The student movement in Serbia transformed 15 minutes of silence into the loudest call for political change their country has witnessed in decades. How effective do you think student-led movements are compared to traditional political opposition? What makes the Serbian student protest particularly powerful? Subscribe to Omni for continued coverage of democratic movements worldwide that balance factual reporting with nuanced geopolitical analysis traditional media often misses.